Hey everyone, I'm John and thanks for joining me here in the Boneyard, and thanks to everyone who took part in the polls and posts where we discussed and voted on what are the greatest works in the career of filmmaker John Carpenter, which of course brings us to number one on that list, as voted by all of you out there in the Boneyard, John Carpenter's Halloween, the movie that catapulted the filmmaker onto the world stage.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
This work is more than just a great horror movie. It is a cultural touchstone in the evolution of modern horror, and a work that inspired a whole genre and generation of do-it-yourself filmmakers who followed its lead to try and make their way in the film business.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
So, here we go, and here are my thoughts on John Carpenter's Halloween. First and foremost, as a fan of horror movies, a filmmaker myself, a lecturer in film, and a movie fanatic, what stands out about Halloween to me is that it thrives on simplicity. While low-budget horror cinema is often remembered for its excesses, think of movies like Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, full of blood and spectacle.
Why have you disturbed our sleep?
Or movies like Hellraiser, with its convoluted mythologies. Halloween strips everything down to the barest essentials, and in doing so, it becomes something elemental. The film's genius lies not in its complexity, but in its restraint. And this, of course, comes out of sheer necessity, because the budget of the film was only $320,000, and even back in the late 1970s, that was a very low-budget production. And Carpenter only had 17 days to shoot all the footage he needed to edit the final movie together.
I'm big on form and structure, and within a certain context doing certain things. The film I'm making now, Halloween, hopefully will be is a horror film, loaded with scares, suspense scares, hopefully not grisly or gory, but suspenseful, making people on the edge of their seats. I enjoy doing that.
To make sure he could achieve all of what he had told producer Irwin Yablans that he could deliver, Carpenter, of course, was very smart, as he always is. And he wrote the story of Halloween to be almost startlingly minimal, basing the character of Michael Myers on a mental patient he'd seen when he was a young student.
When I was in college, I had a class, psychology or something, and we visited a mental institution, and this was in Kentucky. And I visited the most serious mentally ill patients. Then there was this kid, I must have been 12 or 13, and he literally had this look that I gave the lines to Donald Pleasance to say.
Blank, pale, emotionless face, and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes.
It's a schizophrenic stare, is what it is. It's a real evil stare. And it was unsettling to me. And it was like the creepiest thing I'd ever seen, just because as a stranger, it was completely insane.
The grounding in such a real fear doesn't need any more exposition. It is what is truly terrifying, in that we never know who you are passing by on the street, or who you may be talking to in the bar, and what they might be capable of, and it gives me chills just to think about that. And what Carpenter wrote based on that was that a masked killer escapes from an asylum, returns to his hometown, and begins stalking a group of babysitting teenagers. There is no explanation of evil beyond the chilling idea that evil simply exists.
I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
Carpenter frames Michael Myers as the shape, a blank embodiment of terror. The shape is the shape of horror, the relentless specter of death that will get you no matter where you run or where you try to hide.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff. You can either ignore it, or you can help me to stop it.
There is no hope and no chance of escape. Myers is a force of nature, and even the fabled hero can't stop him with his silver bullets.
So I added the slight supernatural edge to this guy. You know, sure, he's a person who escapes from a mental institution. And he comes back to revisit a small town, but he can't be killed. And there's a certain feeling of, you know, maybe he is not quite a human being, but this is somehow something bigger, which is Donald Pleasance's role in the film. He keeps saying, you don't understand what you're dealing with here. You do not understand. This is something, in a sense, he's saying this is like the devil.
This reduction of character doesn't make him less frightening, it makes him more so. Because the audience has no narrative devices to contain him or explain him. As actress Jamie Lee Curtis would go on to say later, when the franchise was rebooted in 2018, forgetting all sequels but the 1978 original, she said,
by making it a human, but inhuman, by making him move slowly and deliberately, makes you think you can outrun him, but he kills so viciously and with such disregard. It has no rhyme or reason. It is terrorism. It is the ultimate reason why terrorism scares us so much, because it's random. I think the enigmatic nothingness. He's like a movie screen. We project everything onto his face, and we project all of that fear that we feel.
And I think that same philosophy extends to Carpenter's direction. Influenced by the clarity and economy of classical filmmakers like Howard Hawks and Alfred Hitchcock, filmmakers that he had seen deliver talks when he was a student at USC Film School.
You know, one thing they taught me in film school was no matter what, if you're a gun for hire or you write the screenplay yourself, no matter what, make it your own film. Make it personal. Bring something to it. One of my teachers at film school was Orson Welles, and he said, look, sometimes I do scripts because there's a great chase in the 10th reel, and I can do something with that chase. He said, I just don't do it for necessarily the whole movie, but when I do it, it's all mine. So I have the same philosophy. I had some great teachers back at this.
Yeah, Welles was a good teacher.
Orson Welles, Howard Hawks, John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, they were all lecturers at our school. I learned from the greatest.
Carpenter shoots Halloween with a kind of old school rigor. His movies always look beautiful and widescreen, and the camera rarely calls attention to itself, yet it always moves purposefully when it has to. The long takes, steady pans, and restrained compositions allow the suspense to build organically and take place within the frame and let the audience slowly absorb the horror and then be invested enough to jump when the action takes place.
Sure, stuck in the window. Yeah, but I've seen you stuck in plenty of other positions.
My parents are gone.
Now you might say, well, he had no choice. This is the accident of low-budget storytelling. It was the economy that led to this. But we see those same techniques in Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, so we know that this was his style and choice, not the accident of history and predicament.
Jesus, come on.
It's something similar to, say, a film like Night of the Living Dead, another low-budget horror classic, which is one of my favorite movies, and indeed an inspiration for Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. But it is the accident of history that movie looks as good as it does, because we know Romero's next few films didn't have that same energy, same look, or same feel.
Dad, I just don't want to go to work in your baby food factory.
Whereas Carpenter's clarity always had a distinctive style and direction in all of his earlier works. The absence of flashy editing is another example of Halloween's minimal approach, because Carpenter only had minimal takes for each shot because of schedule, meaning that the shots are meticulously planned and framed perfectly, so we as an audience don't get bored because there isn't much coverage in Halloween of each scene. For example, in the scene where Loomis tries to explain Myers, looking past the wall, looking beyond the wall, looking only at this very night and as the pure embodiment of evil, there are only a few shots.
Jesus. Are you all right? Yeah.
A wide and a close-up of the actors, one of which is held on Loomis for a minute of dialogue. Of course, it helps that Donald Pleasance was a seasoned professional actor who could handle all of that dialogue in one go and deliver a great performance. But that perfectly, minimally lit set and classically composed shot also forces the audience to inhabit the same continuous headspace and physical space as the characters themselves.
I watched him for 15 years, sitting in a room, staring at a wall, not seeing the wall, looking past the wall, looking at this night, inhumanly patient.
It makes us lean in and listen and pay attention. It's so simple, but it's so perfectly executed. There is also the term liminal space, which I've just been introduced to by a new channel member here in the Boneyard, Perry James, which is, as I understand it, and bear with me because it's a new term that I'm just learning, is a term that means an in-between space, or a space that evokes a sense of unease, or a transitional space that is untethered from any kind of reality, or an uneasy reality. This is a term which I think could be used to describe the way Maya's sudden appearances feel like violations to our cinematic order. Hence, we get that great ending where we see all of the liminal spaces where Myers has stood, the top of the stairs and things like that, meaning that the shape, the evil, the spectre of death could appear and take us at any moment in this netherworld. Interesting stuff. You learn something new every day, so thanks very much for that, Perry. I really appreciate it.
And in the end, it just becomes relentless. It just keeps going. But not relentless in terms of like a siege or an attack, but he's everywhere. Don't go in the house, don't go up the stairs. It's that kind of scene.
There is also a philosophy and undeniable technical talent behind the creation of Halloween, and how Carpenter understood the old masters of cinematic techniques that allowed him to demand attention from the audience. And to this very day, Halloween is considered a masterwork of horror because he stuck with this classical look.
Howard Hawks was the kind of ultimate hero to me. And I saw his movies as a kid, but I wasn't familiar with some of the older ones and the scope of his work until I went to film school at USC. And all of a sudden I saw all his movies at once. And I saw something that I hadn't seen in other filmmakers. Let's take an example, Hitchcock. Hitchcock wears his technique on his sleeve, so he's easy to love. Anybody can love Alfred Hitchcock. They can say, well, I can see why he's so good. Howard Hawks is invisible. You don't really understand what he's doing, but he does his technique and works it on you. And you think you're just watching a movie and watching actors. In reality, you're watching a master at work.
Even the iconic score is pared down, a simple piano motif repeating itself like a heartbeat, driving Myers forward and exciting the audience with simple elements like piano, synth, and a beat that builds to a crescendo of horrific and scary violence.
Oh no.
Just as the narrative refuses excess, the music refuses to be any kind of ornamentation. Its very sparseness and simplicity becomes a source of terror itself, a signal that nothing stands between us and the lurking threat. Myers and the score are just linked perfectly. By keeping the story, performances, visuals, and music stripped way down to the bare bones, yes, out of necessity, but also cinematic direction and choice from Carpenter, Halloween becomes lean and timeless. Its influence on the slasher genre is immeasurable, but what's often forgotten is how much of that influence is rooted not in addition, but subtraction. Carpenter removed the noise and left only the essentials of fear. It is a movie that caused a sensation and sparked a whole new era of cinema, but it also has its roots firmly planted in the grand tradition of classic cinematic composition and a style influenced by the old school masters. Halloween didn't try to reinvent the wheel. It was actually Carpenter trying to use all of his skill and everything he'd learned as a student and as a passionate filmmaker and director to tell the best story he possibly could. And as film fans, what more could we ask for?
What I hate worse than anything else is pretension in any form. Somebody who's pretentious and is delivering a message. Because I don't think motion pictures is at all intellectual. I think it's all feelings. People laughing, crying, screaming, etc. Getting excited, getting upset, whatever. And when there's a message to it, it's not my kind of movie.
In the end, Halloween is perhaps the best version of itself that it could possibly ever be, precisely because it resists the urge to be more. Its simplicity, low budget, and fast schedule is not a limitation. It pushed a young filmmaker to his very creative limits, and that is the film's greatest strength.
In the making of the film, I went about to remake an American myth. I think that if anything's happened to us, our myths are fading away. We have none anymore. We're looking for myths. Myths are important. Fairy tales are important. Things that stir us in a primal way. And I wanted to make basically the incarnation of evil, if you want to call it, ultimate evil. And I created this masked shape that lurked around, that could be anywhere at any time.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
And those are my initial thoughts on John Carpenter's Halloween, a video voted for by all of you out there in the boneyard. There obviously will be much more to come on this movie because I'm simply in love with all of Carpenter's work. So, if you're a Carpenter fan, you can also check out my John Carpenter playlist for more videos and analysis on the works of this inspirational filmmaker. If you did like this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and please consider becoming a member here on the channel so you can teach me just like Perry James did. Check out the store tab to help support independent content creation, and don't forget to leave a comment below to keep this discussion going, because it's your contributions that keeps me digging up classics right here in the boneyard. So please take care, everyone, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.
Go get me a beer.
I thought you were gonna get me one.
Yeah.